Nice, good clean out. Oh, that's a really good O. Don't do this whole row first, and then we'll do something else for the next row. Good job. Nicole, you've got the O.
Hey guys, welcome to my page. I'm Dr. Theo T. Naimi. I'm actually a board-certified plastic surgeon and a homeschooler. And today I'm going to be covering a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's the topic of how to teach a young child how to write. Okay. One of the reasons it's important to learn how to write at a very early age is because most of the material that you're going to interact with for all of learning incorporates some degree of writing. If you're doing math at an early age, you have to be able to write the numbers. If you are doing reading, language arts at an early age, you have to be able to write some of the words. And so once a child has the ability to write, it greatly improves their ability to advance their learning, allows them to integrate more material, and allows them to work with higher level material. Before a child can write, all they can do is essentially try to sound out words and reads, and they can be taught orally. Once a child can write, then they can actually write down their responses to some of the questions that they're being asked. And so I think writing is really important to try to teach early. I have two children. I started teaching both children just before they turned the age of 2, and I found tremendous success. I started somewhere around 18 months, maybe a little earlier with my son, and it took almost a year to really get going. So by the time they were, nearing 2 to 3, they were comfortably writing. And I'll show you an example. This is actually my daughter's writing when she was about 2 years of age. And you can see she can form letters, she can sound out words. And all of that was mostly because they started at an early age, okay? So I wanted to talk about some of the common methods of teaching how to write and some of the issues that I've found with it. So one of the most common methods of teaching children how to write is to get a tracing book, okay? A tracing book is a book that has the letters formed, and they have either, marks or perforations that allows a child to essentially trace the letters. One of the biggest issues with a lot of these tracing books is that children become dependent on it. They trace for such a long time that the moment the tracing is removed, children essentially have no way of generating either the letter or the number that you're trying to teach them without the actual tracing book, okay? And so as a parent, if you've done a lot of this and your children have been tracing certain letters over and over and over and over again, then you take the tracing away, all of a sudden they're kind of at a loss for what to do next because they become almost so dependent on the tracing that they're not able to, generate, the beginning portions of the letters on their own. This is the issue I struggle with when I first started with my children. And I realized really quickly I needed to come up with a more creative way of teaching them how to write without making them so dependent on the tracing that the moment the tracing was away, they would essentially feel lost and confused, okay? And so based on this, I set aside some time to devise almost a different method of teaching how to write that would not be so reliant on the tracing system, okay? In a couple minutes, I'm going to share the intricacies of that method for those of you who are tuning in. But I wanted to talk about how to actually introduce writing from a systemic standpoint, okay? If you're going to introduce writing and if you do too much, you're going to frustrate a child and then turn that child away. So what I would probably recommend if you're going to introduce writing, especially to a young child, is do segments that are 5 to 10 minutes long, okay? I wouldn't do much more than that. But the key is no matter how short the segments are, try to do it consistently. So if you can do it either once a day or twice a day, that's going to yield way more dividends than spending an hour one day, then letting 3 days go by and then spending more time. Because essentially, the more you do it at a frequent pace, the sooner a child learns, okay? The other thing to think about is if you're going to teach writing, where do you start, okay? You don't want to start with the most complicated letters in the alphabet. For example, a Q, for example, is probably not the first thing to start with when you're trying to teach writing, okay? It's easiest to start with the simplest portion of the alphabet, which is usually the letter I, okay? Before you even get to that, one of the questions that most parents have is, well, how do you even teach a child how to hold the pencil, right? It goes to say, if you can't hold the pencil or the writing instrument, then you can't actually write. Okay. And so that's the initial part of this, which is teaching something called the pencil grip. Okay. The pencil grip, or something I call the tripod position, are when these three fingers come together to hold an instrument. Okay. Oftentimes, a child who's never learned how to write is going to hold a pencil like this and try to write in this manner. Okay. And we've seen children who can write like this. One of the biggest challenges to writing like this is when a child then goes to learn how to write appropriately with the tripod position, and every letter they've learned how to formulate doing this has to be retaught. Okay, it may be a little faster for them to relearn since they've learned the shapes of the letters. Nonetheless, if a child is taught the pencil grip in this manner, right, then they'll have to go back and relearn the pencil grip. There are a couple of other interesting methods of holding and grasping a pencil that children sometimes adopt. But as a parent, if you see your child is adopting a grip that is somewhat unorthodox, I think it's best to correct that at an early age rather than letting that persist and then risk having to re-educate your child on how to form all the letters that he or she has already learned how to write. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. Other than that, you're spending a lot of time with your child working on writing in a way that doesn't necessarily benefit them in the future. And what you'll end up having to do invariably is go back and spend more time doing it. So in my opinion, it's best to learn how to do that pencil grip correctly the first time around. Okay, so let's begin. When you try to integrate the pencil grip, I wouldn't even try to call it the pencil grip or indicate to a child what you're trying to do. I always start with something I call the secret handshake. Okay, I have a child take their fingers and meet the three fingers together, and this is the secret handshake. And every time I see them, I go, okay, let's do the secret handshake over and over and over again. Okay. When they get it right, you get excited. You show them that, you're really proud of what they're doing and you really make a big deal out of it. Okay. You let them know, make it a game. Don't tell anybody the secret handshake. Every time you see them out, you do the secret handshake. What the child doesn't realize is that secret handshake is the beginning of the actual tripod position. Okay. Or the pencil grip. Once a child actually has the ability to demonstrate, right, that they can do that tripod position, then the next step is putting an object in their fingers. As a parent, I wouldn't start with a permanent marker or a pen or anything you can actually start with a straw, a stick, anything, right? And then you ask them to show you the secret handshake with that object, okay? Sometimes you can pretend that object that they're holding, the stick, is actually the nose, right, for the handshake, okay? Once a child can demonstrate they can hold either a straw or any object, really, a stick, a marker, pencil, right? Then you want to teach a child how to position that object in space. So if a child has the tripod position and knows how to hold it, but is all over the place and can't position the pen or pencil in place, they're not going to be able to write, okay? So once you do that, then what I do is ask them to hold that object and see if they can touch, say, a piece of paper, okay? And once they can do that, then I make the piece of paper smaller, see if they can touch that. Then we make a game out of it, make that smaller, and see if they can touch that. Make it even smaller, and see if they can touch that. The moment a child can do that well, they've demonstrated they have enough fine motor control to be able to position the pencil or pen or marker or whatever the writing instrument is going to be in the future in the right place. And that will be the beginning of how to teach a child how to write. Let me go back through it. First off, if your child is holding the object incorrectly, like this, I would discourage a child from doing that because eventually you're just going to have to reteach them how to write all the other letters properly. Then you start with the secret handshake where the tripod position meets. Once they can do that, you place an object in there. Let me grab an object so I can demonstrate. So for example, I would put this object in there and then have them work on just touching something else, a piece of paper, a part of the wall, your finger, right? And that demonstrates fine motor control. Once a child can do that, then they're ready to work on the beginning of writing. Okay. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button. Over the course of the next couple of days, I'm going to do a part 2 to this that actually shows the beginning portions of how to teach a child to formulate their letters and their numbers. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Take care.